Welcome to Sisflix, the podcast where we won't judge you for talking through the movie. Sisflix are the movies you laugh at, yearn for, and overanalyze with your girls, significant others, and now us.
We are your hosts,
Paola
and Nadhya, two sisters and designers who discuss chick flicks we hate to love,
tropes we love to hate,
and all of the aesthetic choices in between. Join us as we break down our favorite movies together.
Welcome back as we continue to talk through the movie One Day, where we meet Dexter and Emma on St. Swithin's Day in 1997.
We cut to St. Swithin's Day, July 15th, 1997. We see Emma in the pool. She's swimming. We don't get a ton of development here because as far as you know as the viewer, their friendship is effectively over. If not over, then at the very least on hold. I'm giving this book so much praise. And we know me to be just a notorious hater. I loved this book so much. It provoked so much feeling in me and so much thought. And I found it to be so evocative of such a specific type of relationship and a specific type of longing that people experience. And one thing that I feel like I would not have liked in another book, but in this book was done so well, maybe because the entirety is written from the third person perspective, maybe because you are taught to expect a transition between Dexter and Emma's thoughts early on in the book. You get into the heads of 5 or 6 other people throughout the course of the book for a paragraph or two at a time. So Ian wants to propose to Emma, and in the moment that he's planning this proposal, you're in his head. His gears are turning about we are going to go on vacation in a couple months, and I could bring the ring with me, but what if we get a plate of calamari? Would it be funny to put the ring in a plate of calamari because it's all rings? And it's Ian, you fuck, god damn it. But it makes you sympathetic to these tertiary supporting characters, I think, in a way that you wouldn't be if it was written in a different style. You feel tenderness for Ian because you know he's a sucker, but you know he's in love with Emma. His love is kind of pure and he's just a schmuck.
And you want Emma to be happy.
Exactly. You want her to be with someone who worships her, but not maybe like that.
Yeah, but also that she loves as well,
that
right?
She respects, because she does not respect Ian.
St. Swithin's Day, 1997. And all we see is Emma's out for a swim. This is part of her routine exercise. We've seen it. We see it at the beginning of the movie. We see it here. It just shows us that frame. It's just Emma. So she's on her own. She doesn't have Dexter. You don't see what's going on in the movie between these July 15th. But in the book, you do get a little bit of insight.
You do.
And this is a time with Emma where she's not talking to Dexter. You find out that through the year, at some point, Emma has been trying to meet with publishers to get a book published that she has already written. Mm-hmm. And so we know that's going on. However, they don't explicitly tell us this in the movie. They're just for 1997, they just show you Emma taking a swim. And I think just kind of to let you know, she's doing her thing. She's fine. She's on her own. Yeah. Now we cut to 1998. For 97, we only got that one shot of Emma. Mm-hmm. However, in the book, I think they moved some things around.
They do. Because
some things that we see happening in 1998 in the movie happened in the book in 1997. Mm-hmm.
And then she starts having an affair with her boss at the school at which she works. And she decides to dissolve that affair. And that's ultimately what leads to her deciding to become an author full time. There's one point where she's trying to get a meeting with a publisher. It doesn't go well. And her boss calls her and is where the fuck are you? Really? Mm-hmm. This is what you're doing? You're lying. You're such a bad teacher. He's just being a dick because he's hurt. Mm-hmm. And Emma's fuck this, dude. I quit. I quit. I'm done now.
They don't mention this at all in the movie. This only happens in the book.
The relationship with the boss, I think, serves Emma's character development, but I also think for the purposes of the movie where you're focusing on the central love story, it's a little superfluous. Mm-hmm. I understand why that was something that went.
You have to introduce an extra character.
Exactly. For only 2 years, quote unquote. So it would be 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what we do see when we cut to 1998 is Dexter is hosting a new show called Game On.
And he's got long, disgusting hair.
He looks terrible. his agent comes to talk to him and is pretty much like, hey, look, so they are deciding to go a different direction. And Dexter's like, oh, yeah? He's like, yeah, like direction away from you. So he has been kicked out of the show. When you're in his head in this point of the book, he's pretty much like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah. What I used to be cool and hot and people wanted me to be on their shows and now they don't.
He can't like put his finger on where he fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's just, he's not likable. He's an unlikable person. He banked on always being a TV personality and forgot to prepare for when he
wasn't.
The type of show he was hosting where, you know, it's a nighttime show. It's for fucking kids or drunk people, dancers. You're not hosting that in your mid-30s or 40s. And he never prepared for that. He was always in this moment where he's like, oh, I'm the shit because I'm a TV presenter.
Well, even what you just said, in this moment, he's very in the moment. He's terrible at like thinking things through and planning shit out. And that's not just like the addict behavior. I think that's like a part of his character. And now I think it's starting to hit him how much he has overestimated himself and how much he has underestimated his life changing.
And maybe if you're a person who's in your mind, like in your right mind, you see those things happening, you see the writing on the wall, and you start to say, let me learn direction. Let me learn how to produce. Let me learn these other aspects of my career that I can tap into that can carry me through my adulthood, right? And probably make more money, probably be more respected in the industry. But no, he just banked on an image. That's all he had to offer. He never considered that his image wasn't going to be good enough, that he might need some knowledge and talent at some point.
And his agent goes on to tell him, and I don't think his agent needed to say this. This feels like what we call twisting the knife. Everyone loves you, but in that love to hate you kind of way. We just need to find someone that loves you for real.
And then we cut to Emma.
We sure do.
And it's the first time you see him like actually worrying about what comes next.
Yes. First time you see him like genuinely thinking
like, oh shit.
Yeah, like who am I? Like questioning himself, getting a bit of the existentialism that Emma got 7 or 8 years prior when she's working at the Mexican restaurant. These feelings of like, I'm floating. I don't really know what I'm doing. I feel aimless and like I don't have any talent anymore. She got over that hump in her early 20s. He's there now.
Coming down from the high of having success.
Yep.
She was there before succeeding on anything. Then where she felt she was kind of stuck, right? Yeah. Everybody's stuck at 25. And that's pretty much true. Unless you have, you know, I'm sure there's fucking Sabrina Carpenter and
Olivia Rodrigo.
Olivia Rodrigo out here killing it on the under 25.
God damn.
But for us normal people, yeah, no, you're not going to have it figured out at 25. Yeah. And that's kind of what Dexter had going on. He was young and he was on TV and everybody loved him and he was attractive. And now he's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Now what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Who am I now? And that's tough to go through in your 30s, let me tell you.
That's a hard pill to swallow. Let's all keep our existential crises to our 20s. Easy to bounce back. Your back hurts a little less. So we cut from that depressing scene to July 1999. We see Dexter walking around rehearsing saying, I love you. Because he has a girlfriend. This girlfriend is played by Romola Garai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But she plays second Bryony in the Atonement movie. And I will always think of her in that role. She was also in the Dirty Dancing sequel. Anyway, so Dirty Dancing Havana Nights. Anywho, so that's his girlfriend. She's very, very beautiful. Her family looks like they are very rich and awful people. Just genuinely fucking awful.
Well, they have an indoor pool in their home, so
that would definitely contribute to them being awful. He's meeting her family for the first time.
I meant rich.
No, I meant awful. He's meeting her family for the first time. And they're kind of like, so, you know, Sophie, his girlfriend's name, mentions that you used to be on TV. And he's like, oh, yeah, like I was a TV presenter like for a while. But, you know, I'm kind of out of that now. I'm trying to get into other parts of filmmaking, producing, etc. That's kind of fake. That's like a shadow answer. Her demonic brothers are like, remember, Mom, you fucking hated that show. You thought he was so stupid and gross. And anytime it was on, you'd be like, turn it off. I hate that guy. Remember?
Yes.
They're fucking awful.
So he's already making a terrible impression on his girlfriend's family.
Oh, yeah.
When you're reading this, he really wants to make a good impression on these people.
Yes.
He wants to say that he loves her. Like, he feels that she's helped him get to a better point in his life. She's helped him get more serious. He makes a point to say she doesn't like to laugh because it does something weird to her face. You know, she's does not sound like a fun person. But apparently this is the type of person that got him to get his shit together in one way or the other. And he really wants to make a good impression. This is all he's got now. He's no longer on TV. All he's got now is, will this girl love me back? Will her family love me back? Because, again, he's lost his mom. Him and his dad don't get along. And they don't ever bring up his sister in the movie. But he has a sister and they didn't get along in the book.
Right. Exactly.
And Emma's out of the picture. They still have not connected again. So
he's looking for an anchor almost. And he's looking for some form of accountability. Even when he's talking about Sophie's like rigidity, how she's no fun. It's kind of like, yeah, but I love that because I was too fun. Like, I did too much in the other direction. She keeps me grounded. Like, I think he says that.
Yeah.
I think I'm quoting that from the book. Like, she keeps me grounded. And it's like, okay.
Got
that's
it.
what you need.
If that's what works for you. And then the mom suggests they play a party game. And they proceed to play the dumbest game I have ever seen in my life, which is pretty much just you blindfold somebody and they have to try to hit you by just the sound of your voice. And so he's just getting wonked in the head. And so it's the brother he's playing against and he's like
and the
going at
sucks.
it. They think it'll be a good idea for him as a first timer to play against Sylvie. And he's already so pissed from getting
absolutely walloped.
You're supposed to like ask a question and the person's supposed to answer. And by where you hear their voice coming from, that's how you know where to swing. He forgets to ask the question and he just swings and ends up breaking his girlfriend's nose.
Swings the fuck out of this fucking like rolled up magazine. Destroys this woman's face.
He took out all his anger on this poor woman's face.
Ooh.
That's how we end 1999 with Dexter. Now we cut to Emma. We see Emma's walking into her apartment and Ian is on the couch. I mean, to her knowledge, she's arriving home and Ian's there. But you learn from their conversation, they have broken up. Ian's not living there anymore. He broke his way into the apartment to look through her stuff because he's so distraught from the breakup and suspects like that she's with somebody else already. So she literally walks in on Ian drunk on the couch with her shit all over the place because he just looked through all her stuff.
So she's always kept these like handwritten notebook journals. She's kept them with her through her life, carried them with her from apartment to apartment. And he is throwing her old journal entries in her face because a lot of them, unfortunately, happen to be about Dexter and the relationship she wishes that they had.
And he's pretty much like, oh, so I found out that my person who's supposed to be my fiance, because you learn that Ian proposed and she said no. So here we get a little bit of insight into what's happened in the previous year. Ian had proposed at some point. She said no. They're broken up. And
he moved out.
He's having a fit because he's going through her shit and found all these poems about Dexter, who's not even in the picture anymore.
He's just picking a fight and being jealous for jealousy's sake.
I think it's just distress.
Yeah.
So they're like in a heated argument, yelling at each other. And then they cut to them sitting outside, talking to each other. And he's just like, I miss you.
Like, I'm sorry. I know that what I'm doing is really shitty and I'm acting like an asshole. I miss you. I love you. You know, like I wanted to marry you. And fucking respect. She just goes, I know.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to say it back to make him feel better, but doesn't need to reassure him, right? She didn't love him. They both know that.
And something that he says after having read all these journal entries is, I guess it's a good thing we didn't get married. And this is one thing I do appreciate that came from Ian. He tells her, your stuff's pretty good. You're better than you know. You should put yourself out there. Because at this point in the movie, she hasn't written yet. She hasn't gone to the publisher. This has happened already in the book. But in the movie, they kind of moved this up. So at this point in the movie, she hasn't written a book yet. She hasn't been talking to publishers. They make it where it's Ian kind of encouraging her. Like, listen, you should put your shit out there.
Because of that, in the movie, you're left with this sense of satisfaction because their relationship happening has had a good outcome.
Right. It propelled something.
Exactly. Like, yeah, maybe it feels like she wasted 2.5 years of her life with some guy, like in a dead-end relationship. But then he told her, like, hey, remember how I like got really fucked up and sad and read your fucking journals? They're really good and you should do something with that. Okay, bye. I've served my purpose as a character.
And there's my redemption arc.
Exactly.
Next thing we cut to is Y2K.
Can I just say, I remember the year 2000 like happening.
It felt like it happened in slow motion. Like there was so much going on.
There was so much buildup. I was freshly 6 years old. Paola was freshly 11 years old.
Yep.
And we were at our house with our cousins as our parents had a very uncharacteristic and never to be repeated New Year's Eve party.
Yo, that shit I remember like it was yesterday. Like we were up. We didn't care that the ball was going to drop. And there was so much anticipation coming, like, because people thought everything was going to shut off. People thought like computers were just going to like explode.
Take over.
Or nobody, there was going to be a power outage. There was so much
drama.
talk about what was going to happen at the end of a century, at the end of a millennia, there was so much talk. And we just couldn't wait to see the new Backstreet Boy video that was dropping at midnight on MTV. It was larger than life. And I remember it like yesterday. Stayed up till midnight to watch these motherfuckers dance in robot costumes. That shit.
And that was the pinnacle of technology. The 3D was 3Ding, okay? Like, you couldn't tell me. You could not tell me that that wasn't art. Clearly, Dexter and Emma, I don't think they cared enough about the Backstreet Boys Millennium music video. And that's a mistake on their part.
They don't see.
They can't see. They can't see.
They can't see how their loves affected their reality. Every time they're down, you can make it right. That's what makes you larger than life. They just couldn't see it.
Anyway, back to the podcast. It is July 2000. St. Swithin's motherfucking day.
And we're at a wedding in a beautiful church.
Emma's there and she is looking like Anne Hathaway post makeover in her Princess Diaries realness.
She does. With an Asian inspired dress on though, which was a thing in the early 2000s.
She's wearing, like a kimono inspired satin dress. Her hair is blown out. Her makeup is like really too good, I would venture, for the 2000s. Really good. She looks great. And Dexter is there with his girlfriend Sophie. He's not looking nowhere near as good. He looks tired. His hair's a little shorter in a way that like doesn't suit him. They're also making him a little grayer. So he's aging a little more quickly than Emma.
So here you start seeing the scale tipping the other way, where you're seeing like she's gone through a glow up and he's kind of going downhill a little bit.
Yes. And some of that is nature and some of that is him.
Mm-hmm. He's just tortured his body up until this point.
So. Lord Jesus. So we see that the wedding they are at is Tilly's wedding, Emma's former roommate in both college and then in her first apartment in London after. And Dexter and Sylvie are sitting on the opposite side in different pews than Emma. They make eye contact once.
They're kind of, I don't know if they're avoiding each other. It doesn't look like they're avoiding each other.
But they're not seeking each other out. Later on, after the ceremony, Dexter is talking to an old friend.
We see him talking to Callum. The last time we saw Callum was in the beginning of the movie.
When he was making out with the bride.
With Tilly.
Dexter's talking to Callum, who has, since they graduated, become an incredibly successful businessman.
So something that kind of comes full circle here. They only mention it briefly in the movie. But in the book, while they were in their 20s, Callum invited Dexter to join him in investing in like some computer technology or something.
And this is in like 1990.
Dexter's like, what? And this is one of those instances where he plays this game in his head where he's like, well, how does that sound like when I introduce myself? Like, oh, I'm a computer guy. Like, no, that doesn't sound cool. No, that's not a thing I want to do.
Gross, nerdy.
That sounds nerdy. You know, he was always so worried about his image and what he looked like to other people. And so he turned down this offer by his friend. Turns out the guy made money.
Like, fuck you money.
Became rich as shit and now owns a bunch of franchises for Whole Foods type, Trader Joe's type establishments. He's talking to Dexter about this and he's like, yo, you know, like I can bring you in and, you know, you would have to start from the bottom a little bit, but in no time you can work your way up. And Dexter's like, are you offering me a job?
He's like, you want me to work in a fucking restaurant?
Callum is like, yeah, but you know, just to learn the ropes and then you can work your way up, probably own your own franchise.
Right.
But essentially still working for him. And his response to this was like, dude, you wore the same pants in college.
Every day for 4 years.
So you learn from this line, he's still in this mentality where it's just image. What have you learned, Dexter? Nothing, it would seem, because that's the first thing. Like, dude, you wore the same pants and like, what the fuck does that have anything to do with? He's more successful than you.
But he's lucky that Callum is not as prideful because he does not take this shit to heart. He's just like, all right, my man, whatever. If you decide you need a job, feel free to give me a call. Dexter's like, yeah, okay, fine. Everyone knows, right? The reader knows. Callum knows. Dexter even knows. You need money. You need a job.
He doesn't have a job at this point in the movie. He's unemployed.
And he hasn't been on TV.
And he doesn't want to accept a job from this person because he wore the same pants in college for 4 years.
A thing that negative matters. As he's dismissing himself from this conversation with Dexter, they spot Emma by the door talking to somebody else, probably also a former college classmate. And Callum, understanding that Dexter and Emma are friends, but maybe not knowing like the depth of their friendship, Callum is like, oh, Emma Morley, right under our noses. Like, look at her. Wow, she's really hot.
Right.
Dexter is like a little uncomfortable at Callum saying this. He's just like, I mean, yeah, I guess, like, whatever. And still feeling kind of that same sense of like displacement and discomfort where he's like, where is my footing? What am I representing right now? Right. Mm-hmm. At this point, he keeps making like very brief eye contact with Emma. And finally, it seems that they both decide at the same time to approach each other and like finally say something, finally break the ice. And they like sit and talk and catch up. And the way that they fall immediately back into their banter.
They really do.
You realize that they haven't really spoken or kept in touch in any meaningful way since that contentious dinner in 1996. So pretty much 4 years. At this point, you know, you can assume that Dexter is doing at least slightly better at sobriety unintentionally, and it is never explicitly stated in the book that he particularly cares about being sober.
I mean, he's drinking at the wedding. He's not sober, but he's probably taking it
slow.
In the book at this point, he's sneaking drinks.
Yes.
Out of Sophie's gaze because she doesn't want him to drink. They're at this party. So he's like steps away from her
to drink. Yeah.
When he steps away with Emma so they can sit and chat, he takes a bottle of champagne with him.
In the movie, much less ado about that.
It just seems very casual, but when you're reading through this dialogue
and his mindset, like when you're a little bit in his head, you can tell that he's doing that addict stuff. He's doing the, well, I'm catching up with an old friend. I'm just going to grab a little champagne.
Just little sips.
Just little sips, not a big deal. It's getting a little glass. So Sophie's not watching me. It's fine. She can drive. She's not drinking. And it's like, okay, dude, we know the game, okay? And he admits to her that he has screwed up all of his relationships. Accurate. Apologizes slightly, barely, a little bit by admitting this so openly to her. And Dexter tells Emma formally about Sylvie that, quote, she came along and saved me, unquote. Basically like, I'm relying on her to keep me accountable because apparently I'm not very good at that. You know, Emma kind of like fishes for a little bit more depth in this conversation and just goes like, you love her, right? And Dex responds with, I worship her.
Because when he describes Sylvie, right, he describes her and her family like they're well-to-do. They got their shit together. She's attractive. Maybe he sees her and aspires to want to be more like her.
I was literally going to say he talks about her and her family aspirationally.
I want to be well-to-do and look good and be respected.
Like for people to look at me the way they look at Sylvie by virtue of being her partner, which is like, ugh.
Well, at this point, I don't know that Dexter has much of a personality.
Definitely not.
Like you said before, he's looking for an anchor.
He takes Emma by the arm and is like, all right, let's go somewhere else. Let's get out of here. With my dumb American mind, I'm like, y'all gonna go fuck? No. They're just going to the rooftop to talk.
They wanted to be able to have a real conversation.
Away from crazy music, away from crazy dancing. They go up to the very serene, very quiet rooftop. Dexter finally asks her about her life.
Like, how about you? Who are you dating? I told you about Sylvie.
And she's like, fucking nobody. I'm good. I'm chilling. I'm focusing on myself. She says, and I quote, "I'm not lonely. I'm alone," which I love that. I don't know if maybe I'm just reading this at a good time in my life, but like I love that for her. And she reveals that she got a modest advance on which to write a book, which is incredibly exciting. I've never been an author, but I can imagine that that is like a huge deal, especially if it's your first book. Dexter's like, holy shit, like you're really fucking doing it. Wow. You know, I'm so happy for you. And she's like, yeah, I'm really happy about this. This feels good. Mm-hmm. And Dexter then proceeds to, again, I'm just going to say this, a person he has not seen in 4 years. Dexter hands her a wedding invitation. So you still are inviting her to your wedding though. So Emma opens up this invitation. It's like, you can even tell from far away, honestly, it's expensive.
They're lavender scented. So
that's absolutely fucking insane. Also, anytime I think of lavender, I just think of the smell of Fabuloso. Anyway.
That is not lavender.
No, it's chemical. It's chemical scented. It's purple chemical scented.
It's not lavender, but it's good.
Yeah, and I love the smell of Fabuloso. So Emma looks at the date on it and realizes that the wedding is in a month and turns to Dexter and he goes, I believe that's what you would call a shotgun wedding. Burr, burr. Sylvie's pregnant.
Yeah. Because why else would you marry Dexter?
Literally, why else? He's insane. And Anne Hathaway's a very good actress. You see her crack her face open and then rebuild it immediately.
Yeah. To be happy for him.
You see her disappointment surface. And it's funny because you kind of think to yourself, like, they haven't seen each other in 4 years. They haven't maintained their previous relationship for all this time. Where's this disappointment coming from? And it's not even just the marriage. Anybody can get divorced. It's the pregnancy.
Right.
A baby is so much different.
You know, the stakes are much higher.
You just see her brick up the wall that she has built inside of her face and go, oh, I'm so happy for you.
Mm-hmm. You're going to be a great father.
Girl. Oh, do I have news?
You know, they kind of just let the news settle and they both get upset. They're just like in this quiet sadness. This is almost like a point of no return. Even though their friendship hit a wall and they haven't spoken in so long, there was hope somewhere.
For both of them.
For both of them. For Dexter as much as Emma.
And like in the book, take a shot. Just kidding. You'd be dead.
We should start anytime we do an episode on a movie that's adapted from a book, we should just be like, all right, guys, whatever you're drinking, take a shot every time we say in the book.
You're going to be so hydrated. If you're drinking orange juice, you're going to have so much vitamin C. You're never going to get sick again. No, like in the book, this scene hurt me deeply. And I will tell you why. So in the movie, this takes place on a rooftop. They're getting married in London. That makes a lot of sense. In the book, for whatever reason, I think they're getting married on kind of like an estate outside of London. This scene takes place in like a garden maze. Like a gorgeous maze of hedges and stuff that is outside of this incredibly lavish wedding venue.
Very Simon and Daphne at the
Very
Tilbridge
Simon
Ball.
and Daphne. No, Anthony Bridgerton. So they deliberately lose themselves in this maze. And you get glimpses into both of their minds where Dexter's like telling her about Sylvie. And then he's like, oh, I wish I didn't have to tell her about Sylvie. I can imagine Sylvie sitting at the table waiting for me in the ballroom. I don't want to fucking hang out with Sylvie. I want to be here with Emma. Just by being around Emma again for like 5 minutes, he's immediately brought back to like, oh, I love spending time with her. Mm-hmm. She's fucking great. I just want to stay in this maze with Emma forever.
And you get into her point of view and she's saying the same thing in her head. It's such a good book.
Like David Nichols, if I wasn't already paying my therapy bills, I'd be sending you an invoice, my guy, because it's like, for her, it's much more transparently, oh, the hope is gone. The hope that eventually we would like find our way back to each other, not as friends, but as something more, is like gone. Mm-hmm. And she's just kind of like, okay, I can accept that, I think. And then Dexter is like, fuck, I fucked this all up. Like, his lack of hope is coming from a different direction where it's like, why the fuck am I with Sylvie? Shit, we're having a baby. What am I doing? Like, he starts to doubt every decision that he's made that has like led him to this life where it's not Emma with him approaching an altar. And that's like really painful.
The way they take all of that and show it to you in the movie is they just sit and just cry into each other's shoulders. And pretty much she's just like, let's just promise we're not going to disappear from each other's lives anymore. Like, we're going to stay in each other's lives, like, regardless of what happens. And he's like, you know, if you won't, I won't. And then they turn to each other and they kiss, but not like romantic kiss. They Harry and Sally peck in the mouth.
You know I don't believe in that.
And then they do it again, but for a bit longer. And then they stop and look at each other and they're like, we gotta go. And it's almost like they're saying goodbye to whatever hope they had of reconnecting romantically.
I can't wait to see this scene in the miniseries. I hope they stretch this scene to be an entire fucking episode. I want every bit of the conversation that was in the book to be captured in this scene. I mean, of course, it's like very difficult to show someone's inner monologue in a visual medium, but like, I am down. I want to see how they do it. I want this to take forever.
We're going to have 14 episodes to break it down, so I really hope it's good.
I think, well, David Nichols says it was good.
If he says it's good, I'm
we
down.
heard it from the horse's mouth, y'all. He was like, I endorse, and I'm going to listen to him.
So we cut to 2001, and Dexter's a father. He's carrying his crying baby, doing the dad thing. And then we cut to Emma, and she's riding a bike in the middle of London.
Vibing, living her life.
Next, we see him on a bus, falling asleep on a poor man's shoulder. And he's just letting him. This man is a precious man. Next, you see him, and he's working in the kitchen of one of Callum's restaurants. So my guy's literally at the bottom of the totem pole. Humble. On the humble, for sure. And, you know, and Callum's just telling him, like, hey, listen, this is just temporary, just for you to know, like, back of house, you know, how this stuff works. And then we'll get you set up. We'll get you settled or whatever.
Yeah, you'll be at corporate. You'll be an office guy.
Yeah. And then Dexter's like, yeah, you know what? I really don't mind it. Like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, like, it's nice to do something different. And it's nice to, like, do something with my hands.
So, completely different guy. We've made a 180. After a full day of work, he gets home. And Sylvie's getting dressed. She's having a girls' night and she's staying. It's like an overnight girls' night. He's going to stay with the baby. It's apparently his first time staying by himself with the baby because Sylvie's very nervous. We get these really cute scenes of Dexter, you know, being an entertaining dad. He makes up stories and dances and sings. The baby will not stop crying though. So according to the baby, he's terrible at what he's doing. There's this part as he's continuing to try to entertain the baby where he starts reading a book to the baby. We pan into the book and it is a book written by Emma Morley. So now you know she is an official author. She has a book and he's reading it to the baby. As he's walking into the scene, reading this book to the baby, we see a bottle of milk on the table and a glass of wine. So my guy is babysitting under the influence. In the book, this scene is anxiety inducing. It is chaotic because the way he keeps trying to go get a drink and gets upset because the baby is stopping him from going to get a drink. It's terrible to read through.
So representative of a person struggling with addiction, an addiction that's never ever addressed. It's never addressed. I'll spoil that part for y'all. No one ever hits him on his drinking in a meaningful way where it's like, you need help, you need to be sober, you need to go to rehab.
Emma does it at the dinner. She's like, you're fucking drunk.
I haven't seen you sober in 3 years.
Right.
But it's not like you need help.
It was just him having to pretty much hit rock bottom, like, and get his shit together. So the baby finally calms down. Sylvie calls. She's calling to check in on Dexter and the baby. He's telling him everything's going fine. And, you know, and he starts going into this thing where he's having like this moment of self-reflection, and he's pretty much apologizing to her. Like, listen, I know I have not been the best. If you had a receipt, you would have returned me ages ago, but I'm going to be better. I'm going to be a good father. I'm going to be a good husband, promising that he's going to be better and try harder.
In the book, she's immediately like, oh, he's drunk.
In the movie, they don't make it as obvious. But as this conversation is going on, you see some movement behind her in the background. And you realize that there's a guy back there, and he's walking around in a towel. The guy comes into the scene, sits next to her, and you realize that it's Callum.
His fucking friend.
Friend, now boss, is fucking his wife.
Absolutely brutal to just start fucking your friend's wife.
Now, you don't respect Sylvie very much, and now you kind of feel a little bit more for Dexter. Then we cut to 2003. And we see Dexter on a train looking disheveled.
Like dog shit.
He hasn't had a haircut in weeks. He's got like a lopsided t-shirt on.
That collar's baconing.
That collar is baconing. It was not a Hanes shirt. He looks across his seat on the train, and there's a young girl reading Emma Morley's second book. And this makes him smile. He gets to his stop of wherever he's going, and here you find no other than Emma Morley waiting for him at the station.
We see an incredibly hot Emma meeting him at the train station.
She looks amazing. She's got a pencil skirt on. She's got this beautiful lace blouse. Her haircut, I love this haircut on Anne Hathaway. In the beginning of the film, you see the contrast between Dexter and the way he dresses and Emma working at the Mexican restaurant. Now you're seeing the table has turned because she is looking completely put together.
Hot.
And he looks disheveled.
Yeah, she has this incredible pixie haircut, blown out, side swept bang. She's wearing fabulous like sunglasses, the pencil skirt, the heels. I'm like, girl, you are comfortable walking in heels on Parisian streets? Hello. She looks so good.
And then she's like, what have you come as? And he answers, a screwed up divorcee. So now it's confirmed. He's officially divorced.
In the movie, we find out through some exposition, like what Dexter just said, screwed up divorcee, that since Dexter's divorce, they've apparently slept together. On one occasion, they like spent the night together.
At some point between last July and this July.
Yeah, they did the dirty. She was trying to comfort him as he was kind of recovering from his divorce.
Yeah, you know how friends sleep with each other to comfort each other from breakups?
Dexter's visiting, and they had obviously planned this, right? Because Emma goes and meets him at the station. So it's not like he's just rolling up, declaring himself to her. This is something that they've discussed and planned. He's pretty much visiting, even though he's in like a very sour mood and he's really unlikable for this entire scene. He's being like whiny and petulant. So he's like, I thought that meant something. Like I thought us sleeping together was like, it's happening now. That's the thing that sets the other stuff in motion. And Emma's basically like, you had just gotten divorced. You were sad. We had had way too much to drink. It doesn't have to mean anything. Like, why
does it have to mean everything?
Jesus Christ. So Emma's like, you were just blinded by your grief. You needed a lot of comfort. We were drinking a lot. It doesn't have to mean anything. I was just there. And this is kind of going back to something that I don't think Dexter said explicitly in the movie, but he does say explicitly in the book when they're on that vacation that they take to Greece. Mm-hmm. And Dexter's like, oh, I hooked up with a man. And Emma's like, what? You like dudes? And he's like, no, not really. But like, and I quote, a mouth is a mouth is a mouth. Like you're kissing somebody, it's whatever. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost a callback to that. When Emma's like, I was just there. Mm-hmm. You were sad and I was there and this ended up happening.
And a mouth is a mouth. Right.
Exactly.
And he actually goes to a point where he's like, don't you think this is a good idea? Like, don't you think about us? Don't you think this could be something? You know, M and Dex and M. And she's like, I did at some point in the 80s.
And that's brutal. Like, that's a hit. That hits him like a punch.
Right. Like, yeah, at one point. But no, that ship has sailed. And then pretty much it says, hey, so I've been with somebody and we're going to go meet him now.
Again, he's such a baby about it. Like, he's negative in adult.
He doesn't say this, but you truly get the impression that he went out there to go get Emma.
Yes, he was literally getting his girl.
And now she's with somebody else. And we're going to go meet him. We're going to go have lunch.
You'll like him. He's really cool. He's French.
You're going to meet him and you're going to like him and it's going to be fine. She's also very upset. She goes to get dressed and puts on this amazing,
oh my God,
blue A-line dress.
Incredible.
This is my favorite outfit in the whole movie for her, because she
fabulous,
looks amazing. This gives me Audrey Hepburn.
Yes,
it's the A-line fit with her pumps and she's got the short hair.
They walk across this like cobblestone square right across the street from where Emma's boyfriend, French man who's hot, is like playing a jazz club or some shit like that.
Of course he's a musician, because how else can you fuck with Dexter but date a musician, and he's successful
and
he's a performer and French and hot.
It's broad daylight. The sun is streaming down on them. Things are delightfully green, gold, orange.
It is a beautiful day.
Dexter is so upset.
Yeah. He went out there for one reason and realized that it wasn't going to happen. And when he saw himself going to go meet Emma's boyfriend, he was like, I can't do this. I'm going to go. You know, she's bummed out. I'm sure she was looking forward to seeing him and spending some time with him. I don't think she was aware that he went there with those intentions. He's like, I'm going to go. So he turns around and he starts heading back to Emma's apartment to get his shit. And she continues on to go meet her man. So we see Dexter walking back to Emma's apartment. And the next thing we see is Emma running towards Dexter. So this is all happening. The score is playing in the background, the build up as she's running to him. She catches up to him, stops and says, I thought I got rid of you. And you're just like, oh my God.
Right in the heart.
Like, damn. He stops and he looks at her and she looks him in the face and is dead serious. Like, listen,
if you fuck with me, like, your fucking life is over. I swear to God.
Right. If you don't take this shit seriously, you're done. In his face, there's like this relief. And he just grabs her and he's like, I will never hurt you. I would never. And then they kiss and you're like, finally. Finally. Because, forever. And you know what? And as much as we hated Dexter, as much as we disliked him, you see this man hit rock bottom. You see him go through the ringer. Yeah. And so as the viewer, as the reader, you feel like he's paid for all the dumb bullshit he's done. Now at this point in the story, not only do you want to see Emma happy, but you're also at a point where like, okay, can he get his shit together now? Because the whole story, you're rooting for him to at some point snap out of it. But he needed to hit rock bottom to realize what a shithead he was. And he needed to go through all of that shit to finally deserve to be with Emma. He didn't deserve her at any other part of the movie until he had to lose her to value her.
And lose her not once, not twice, several times.
In different ways, for sure. So in this part, as a viewer, you're very happy for them.
If you've made it all the way through this recap with us, love that for you. Love that for us. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
This is a point where if you don't know the rest of this story and you would want to watch it or would want to read it,
and you want to maintain any element of surprise,
pause right now. And let's continue. So we go through 2004. They're happy. They're together. They love each other.
The light is warm. The sun is out.
Beautiful weather. London has never seen weather like that. It hasn't rained on St. Swithin's Day for years. 2005. They're happy. They're in love. They're together. We see them making out. You know, they're very into each other. And even in the book, this is something they say explicitly, like, I'm with somebody that I love and I desire.
It's like a 2-year-long honeymoon
phase. Like a 2-year-long honeymoon phase for them. They are in love and all about each other. We cut to 2005. Emma and Dexter are living together. And Sylvie arrives to drop off Jasmine, her and Dexter's daughter, who's now like 3 or 4 years old. And she runs straight to Emma. She loves Emma. They're like a nice blended family.
Callum stays in the car.
Callum stays in the car and kind of just salutes from the car. But we see Jasmine arriving to the home and how happy she is. You get the sense that they're a well-established blended family. By now, you see that Dexter has opened his own cafe. So he's an entrepreneur. He is running his own business, also revolving around food. And Emma's writing regularly. She still has her blue typewriter that she puts by her.
Next to a very fancy computer.
But it's always there. And you go through this day. And in the evening, Emma goes to Dexter and they have this very tender moment where she's like, I want to have your child. She wants to have a baby. Obviously, they have Jasmine, but she wants them to have a child of their own.
I don't know if they say this in the movie, but in the book, she says, I want to have a child with a man I love. And at this point, you know, they're, 37, 38?
Yeah, I mean,
they're almost 40. Yeah.
And then we jump to July 2006. So it's been a year from that really sweet day that they spent together. And it's been a year since Emma declared that she wanted to get pregnant. We open up on the morning of July 15th, 2006. Emma wakes up and she's kind of having a bad morning. She's in a bad mood. Her and Dexter are getting ready together. They're getting ready to go about their days. Dexter's kind of complaining about like how old he's getting because he's looking older, right? Appearance is a very big thing for him. You know, she's still in a mood and she goes up to him. She's like, hey, just want to let you know I'm not pregnant. And he's like, how'd you know? She's like, well, how'd you think? They've been trying and she hasn't been able to get pregnant in the last year. They have a moody morning and he tries to encourage her. He's like, you know, we're going to continue trying. At this point, you can tell she's kind of exhausted, just disappointed.
And frustrated with herself, frustrated by her own body. Like,
right.
I don't know what it's like to try and get pregnant and not be able to, but I can imagine it probably feels like a betrayal of everything evolution told you were supposed to be able to do.
Absolutely. And so she's feeling that and you can see it. He's super sweet with her. He's like, I'm sorry. Listen, let's have dinner. Let's go to the movies. We'll watch something with subtitles like you like. He wants to cheer her up. So she's like, okay, yeah, give her something to look forward to later that evening. So they each go their separate ways to their respective jobs. And Emma's at her writing desk. Again, we see the typewriter again as she spends the day pretty much brainstorming. You can see like she feels like she's in a funk. And we see Dexter at the cafe. So then we see her go for a swim, how we've seen her throughout the movie. She realizes this is a routine of hers. She goes from a certain time to a certain time. She goes for writing. And then in the middle of the day, she goes for a swim. After she's done with her swim, she calls Dexter pretty much like, I'm sorry that I was so shitty earlier today. I can't wait to meet you later. And I love you. We'll figure this out. He didn't pick up though, so this was in a voice message.
Yeah.
And she goes off to meet him as they had planned. And she goes on her bike. As she's riding her bike around, you realize that you've come to the same scene that you opened to in the beginning of the movie when she's riding her bike after her swim.
Feels incredibly ominous. Just gonna...
She's riding through an alley. We see this at the beginning right before the date goes from 2006 to 1988. So we're back at this same day where we started in the beginning. And she's riding her bike down this alley. And right as she's exiting the alley, a truck comes out of nowhere and slams into Emma on her bike. And you see her lying on the ground, her bike completely destroyed. And you get this shot from above looking down at her on the ground. And she's awake and you're like, okay, it's not like eyes closed, none of that.
This is how this part of the scene goes. I'm going to read it. So, the rain became heavier, oily drops of brown city water, and Emma rode standing on the pedals with her head lowered so that she was only vaguely aware of a blur of movement in the side of the road to her left. The sensation is less of flying through the air, more of being picked up and hurled, and when she comes to rest on the roadside verge with her face against the wet pavement, her first instinct is to look for her bicycle, which has somehow disappeared from beneath her. She tries to move her head, but is unable to do so. She wants to take off her helmet because people are looking at her now, faces craning over her, and she looks ridiculous in a bicycle helmet, But the people crouching over her seem fearful and are asking her over and over again, "Are you all right? Are you all right?" One of them is crying, and she realizes for the first time that she is not all right. She blinks against the rain falling on her face. She is definitely going to be late now. Dexter will be waiting. She thinks very distinctly of two things. The first is a photograph of herself at 9 years old in a red swimsuit on a beach. She can't remember where, Filey or Scarborough perhaps. She's with her mother and father, who are swinging her towards the camera, their sunburnt faces buckled with laughter. Then she thinks of Dexter, sheltering from the rain on the steps of the new house, looking at his watch, impatient. He'll wonder where I am, she thinks. He'll worry. Then Emma Mayhew dies, and everything that she thought or felt vanishes and is gone forever.
That was the exact sound that came out of my body when I watched this movie for the first time.
The pain! As she's laying in the road, and we don't know exactly what's happened to her, we cut to Dexter in the restaurant, waiting for her. And he picks up his phone, listens to her voicemail. Her voicemail is as sweet as it was when she left it. "I love you. I know I was being grumpy today. I can't wait to see you, get home to you. Everything will be fine." He's just so contented. His face looks so simply happy. He's just looking out the window of this restaurant, phone to his ear, and he's just like, nice. We're good. We're cool, baby.
And everything's going to be fine. And then the next scene is him just undercovers a ball of mush in complete distress. Here's where it's confirmed that she succumbs to her injuries as the viewer of the movie. The way David Nichols wrote that paragraph.
It's pain. It's so much pain.
It's weird because you know it's coming, but then it hits you like a brick.
As in, you know it's coming if you have, like Paola and I, seen the movie before you read the book. Or you're watching the movie and you've already read the book. You already know that it's coming. If you're fresh to this story, this comes so out of fucking left that it's not even like a shock anymore. Like, it just shakes you to your core. Like, there are very few books that I've read that I need to literally like put it in my hands and take a breather. Usually, like, once I've started reading the book, it's like the snowball coming down the hill. Like, I just let me keep reading it. Like, I will not stop until I have read the entire book. And I already knew what was going to happen. I had seen the movie. I'd seen the movie like 10 years ago. And it's still reading the words. It hurt.
No.
Oh, it's so good. But it was like, oh shit, that's damn. And like, I guess the one thing that you could say as a viewer, reader, whatever, is like, Emma doesn't really suffer, right? Like, the thing happens to Emma and maybe she like feels like a bit of pain and it's a few minutes and then she's gone, right? Like, she doesn't have to know whatever happens to Dexter after. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have to know however it is that Dexter receives this news. We know from Dexter's track record, it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. If the way he reacted to his mom passing away was any indicator, this is going to be like, it's going to be terrible. I remember the first time I saw the movie, like, as soon as I realized that, like, she's gone, I was like, oh shit, what's going to happen to Dexter?
Mm-hmm. And we cut to July 15th, 2007. Now it's not just St. Swithin's Day, the day that they met. Now it's also the anniversary of Emma's death. For Dexter, July 15th represents the day he met Emma, the day they stopped being friends, the day they reconciled and decided to be in a relationship, and then the date of her death. And we cut to Dexter in the middle of a fucking club. Club music's blasting. He's drinking. He's making out with strangers. He's taking drugs. Like, this guy is off the deep end. You're just seeing him in a club, like, off his ass. Gets into a club fight because he disrespects somebody's girl. Gets beat the fuck up. In the book, he's rationalizing like we should celebrate Emma's life. This is how he's rationalizing all the shit he does that night. And friends take him out, like friends that want to like support him are like, okay, well, all go out together. And they end up just leaving him.
Because they're like, hey, we should all go home. And he's like, no, I want to stay out. And they're like, this is kind of weird and bad. And he's like, oh, no, I'm going to stay out. We're going to celebrate. And they're like, cool. Okay, see you tomorrow. We're not going to stay out anymore. We're 40-year-old men with families and children.
And next thing you see is Dexter pass the fuck out in front of his front door. Like he couldn't even get into his apartment. And this part I don't understand very well because in the movie, does he arrive to Sylvie's? Is that why his daughter sees him?
No, so this is not super explained in the movie. It's explained in the book. So like his ex-wife, Sylvie, is supposed to be bringing over his daughter the next day. When we meet up with Dexter, the first anniversary, it's midnight of the 15th, beginning the day of the 15th. So the 14th has just ended. It is now St. Swithin's Day after midnight. The night just gets worse and worse and worse. He gets fucking beat up. He like loses his wallet. He loses a bunch of money, gets super fucked up, is really drunk, takes drugs. I don't know. Somehow or other ends up at his home, his apartment. We don't really know how. But the next day, the day of the 15th, the quote unquote anniversary, Sylvie is bringing over his daughter, Jasmine, who at this point is 5 or 6, is supposed to be bringing her at like 11 a.m.
No, he's passed out, bloody lip,
bloody face, passed out like just inside his front door, basically in like the foyer. In the book, he's like covered in vomit. He might have like peed himself or something like awful like that. Like Sylvie and his daughter, they have a key. They have a key to his house. That's his daughter. They come inside and Sylvie's literally like, Jasmine, go anywhere fucking else. I need to help your dad. Your dad got sick. Like, don't look at him like this. And she calls his dad, packs him up into her car, drives him to his dad's house, what was once his mom and dad's house, where his dad currently lives alone. And he's just laid out in the backseat of the car, just sobbing, barely coherent. Like, he's not even really sober yet. It's hard to watch, but you really only see it for a few minutes, like 2-3 minutes. It was really hard to read. In a good way. This is all a big compliment to David Nichols.
You're reading the secondhand embarrassment.
Because once he sobers up and he realizes everything that happened, he's like, oh my God. Did my ex-wife had to strip me and give me a bath because I was covered in vomit?
The irony here is that he ends up at his father's house. They don't have a great relationship, but he's taking care of him. It's his son. So he's doing what he can to help him. But hey, his dad is also a widower. Like, he's been there. He probably wasn't drunk and on drugs, but he knows what he's going through. And I think this is the only time in the movie where you see that they can bond over something. And it's sad that it has to be death or the loss of your wife and grief.
It's very clear that his parents were like very much in love. They had been married for a long time and they were very in love. I feel like that makes his dad's grief, like, you know, especially bad. But with Dexter, it's like, it's not just his wife. By this point, he and Emma have been married. It's his very best friend on earth. Dexter is so bereft. Like, he's so aimless and like unanchored. No moral compass, no direction. Like, that's all these things that Emma unconsciously provided for Dexter for years. He's spinning out. You know, this scene, it's like, it's calm, right? Like, once Dexter is kind of like back in his mind, sober, he's sitting with his dad, like in front of the TV. It doesn't look like an amazing life, but it's a life. His dad's like, so is this gonna be an anniversary thing? You're gonna do this every year? This shit? And Dexter's like, I don't know. No, I guess not. And his dad's like, you have to live as if she's still alive. Basically just trying to communicate, like, you can't go off the fucking rails. You have to still be a person. You have to participate in society. the person that you were when you were with her was like your best self. You have to keep trying to be this person. He doesn't say all of that because he's a dad.
He pretty much says, I don't want a heart to heart.
Literally.
Perfect.
Oh, it's so funny.
He starts the
like, I'm
conversation.
going to preface this.
I'm going to preface this with, I don't want a heart to heart.
And Dexter just responds like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can live as if she's still alive. And his dad just says, what do you think I've been doing for the past 10 years? And that's like...
And Jim Sturgis is amazing in this movie. Because the way he reacts to this just with his eyes, it's almost like it's the first time he realized
how much pain his dad has been in.
Yeah. He was so consumed with his own experience. And yeah, he lost a parent. You know, he did lose his mom, and which was his favorite parent, as you can tell. He was so consumed with how that affected him and his life that I don't think at any moment did he think, well, I wonder how my dad feels.
Because his dad is also not super emotional. And he didn't have these moments of like complete disaster that Dexter has already had many times throughout his life.
Or even moments of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because when you find out that his mom passed, you learned that through dialogue from his father. And it was very matter-of-factly. Like, oh yeah, no, she passed away. So he probably didn't see a lot of displays of emotion coming from his dad.
Yeah. You know, his dad just doesn't seem like he was the most open and transparent person.
So after his dad said that, I think he almost looked at him a little bit differently. And you get the impression that he understood. Next time we catch up with Dexter is in 2009. So they actually jumped, 2 years? And he's at the cafe. And guess who walks in through the door? None other than Ian walks in through the door.
Emma's ex-boyfriend.
So again, we're catching up with them July 15th, which is the anniversary of Emma's death. This would be the third anniversary. And Ian pretty much walked in to chat it up with Dexter. He kind of just walked in and was like, hey, just want to see how you're doing. And I hate this day. This is such a terrible day. Like, opens up and it's like, you know, I really used to hate your guts. You did not deserve Emma.
To Dexter's credit, he's like, yeah.
And he pretty much just says how jealous he was of that. How jealous he was that you didn't deserve her, but you made her so happy.
She lit up when she was with you.
In return, she made you decent. And that's the second time that Ian said something that makes sense and is good.
Justice for Ian. Just kidding. He does just fine.
And he pretty much says, you know, and I want to thank you for that. Ian was pretty much thanking Dexter for making her as happy as he did. There's this part of the interaction that I find so funny and satisfying.
Paola finds this very satisfying as an introvert.
And after Ian says that, he's pretty much like, you know, it was really nice to see you. And as they're saying their goodbyes, Dexter is like, you know, we'll keep in touch. And Ian's like, no, I think we're done here. We don't need to do that. You have a nice life.
And even Dexter's like, okay.
And Dexter could not be happier to have heard that he doesn't need to pretend that he's going to keep in touch with this guy. And they end on that note. They hug and he walks out.
And Ian is married and has children of his own.
Yeah.
And is very happy with where his life is at. No longer doing stand-up comedy. Thank God. It says as much to Dexter. You know, it's pretty much like, yeah, I'm really happy with how everything went. But that doesn't mean I ever stopped loving Emma.
Yeah.
Like, she was such a unique person. I'm so grateful that I got to know her.
As are we. So after this interaction, we flash back to 1988, the day that Dexter and Emma met on St. Swithin's Day. When we left them in the beginning of the movie after their graduation night, we left them falling asleep together. So now we meet them again on this day. And it's the next morning, officially. Emma's gotten up and she's waking Dexter up. Because if it didn't rain on St. Swithin's Day, they were going to go do something together. So he's like, you know, but my parents, they're going to show up later. This makes Emma a little disappointed, like, okay, but you had said. And he's like, but that's not until like later this afternoon.
Something that I really love about the way that this scene is described in the book is that Dexter is like ping-ponging between wanting to leave and end this like strange intimacy that he's built with Emma over the course of like the previous night, and wanting to stay with her forever, and then being terrified by the intensity of that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
He really just goes from like almost him trying to criticize her to being like, he finds that he could continue staring at her face forever.
He's almost entrapped in her face. Like, he finds it endearing. Like, everything he's expressing as a flaw in his head, but then he can't look away. Like, there's something, there's a pull. And so in the book, he actually makes up a lie, pretends he calls his parents, and comes up with an excuse as to why he couldn't spend the day with her before, but now can, because he made the decision that he does want to spend more time with this girl.
Mm-hmm. The lie that he had previously told, oh, I need to go meet up with my parents. Sorry, I gotta go. Once he changes his mind, he's like, shit, backpedal. Now I have to undo this lie.
He lies to undo the lie because he wants to spend more time with her. And they go up what's called Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh. And as they're climbing up, they're kind of going back and forth. And Emma's like, if we bump into each other in the future, we'll just be friends.
She's trying to be cool, chill, and nonchalant.
We're casual. They get to the top of this cliff and they're looking out. And as she says this, she follows up with, whatever happens tomorrow, we've had today. And that is forever one of my favorite quotes of all time.
If we ever get David Nichols to listen to this and he hasn't turned it off by this point, just out of sheer embarrassment, just like, I cannot hear people talk about my book this much and how much they enjoyed it. Like, I don't know if I've done my job. You know what I mean? I need the praise to be overwhelming.
Yes, this quote, I think there's a couple from this book and this movie, but this is the one that marked me from the beginning. Whatever happens tomorrow, we've had today. And I think about that all the time. And then Dexter, as they're having this moment, as they arrive at the top of the cliff, he's like, or on the other hand, we could go back to my place.
Bitch.
And so they have like this moment where Emma kind of looks at him and he looks at her, and she turns to him and she's like, I'll race you. They literally race down this hill. And there's this beautiful shot where it's them in 1988 running down this hill. And then coming up the hill, you see a father and daughter. And it turns out to be Dexter and Jasmine in 2011. And then they show you present day Dexter with his daughter going up the hill that him and Emma visited almost 20 years ago at this point. And this is not information you get in the movie, but in the book, to commemorate her memory, he's decided to take his daughter to the locations where him and Emma met and like kind of take a tour of that time. And so this is one of those spots. They just lay in the sun in a similar way that him and Emma laid that day. After we see this interaction between Dexter and his daughter, we cut back to 1988, Dexter and Emma running down through the streets of Edinburgh, kissing, making out, grabbing each other. Like, they're euphorically running back to Dexter's apartment to get it on. They cannot wait. They turn a corner and it turns out that Dexter's parents surprised him earlier than he was expecting them. And they're like, oh shit. Like, literally, if they had sound effects in this movie, you would hear skirt.
And I bet you're wondering how I got into this situation.
Because they literally went from full sprint to dead stop when they see Dexter's parents.
And they're holding hands.
And his parents are like, oh shit, we meant to surprise you.
Also, like, where have you been? We've been waiting for you.
And he turns the corner running with the suit he was wearing last night. And they're like, oh shit, did we interrupt something? And he answers with, no, Emma's just a good friend. They invite her to tea. She's like, no, I'm going to go on my way.
Yeah, like, I'm good. I think I think the mood is sufficiently dead.
And so she leaves. And as she's walking away, we hear running, and it's Dexter coming to catch up with her. Catches up with her, grabs her by the face, gives her an amazing kiss. This scene in the book is described as, they both had the sweetest kiss they would ever have.
I also have this that I can read. Hold
Oof. on. Oof. Direct quotes.
They kiss passionately. It's lovely. In the book, after they kiss, we get, so I should get back. This is Dexter. So I should get back. Are you sure you don't want to come for a drink or something, or dinner? I don't think I should, she said. No, I don't think you should either. He looked relieved, and she felt slighted once again. Why not, she thought. Was he embarrassed by her? Oh, right. Why's that? Because I think if you did, I'd go a bit mad. With frustration, I mean. You sitting there, because I wouldn't be able to do what I want to do. Why? What do you want to do? She asked, though she knew the answer. He put one hand lightly on the back of her neck, and simultaneously she placed one hand lightly on his hip. And they kissed in the street as all around them people hurried home in the summer light, and it was the sweetest kiss that either of them would ever know. This is where it begins. Everything starts here, today. And then it was over. So I'll see you around, he said, walking slowly backwards away from her. I hope so, she smiled. And I hope so too. Bye, Em. Bye, Dex. Goodbye. 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 And that is the end of the book.
So 2 things here. It's almost like David Nichols is writing in the goodbye that you couldn't see them have when she passed. By adding this flashback of their meeting at the end of the story, it's ending the story with a beginning, and at the same time tying it together so neatly and giving you the almost a little bit of closure. You got hit with this loss from Emma, and then he gives you their meeting but also their farewell. It's chef's kiss.
It hurts. It hurts. Oh, it's so good.
It really is.
And that's a wrap on One Day, the movie starring Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis.
I cried when I watched the movie. I cried when I read the book. I almost cried when I'm retelling it to you. And it will happen every time.
The only reason I didn't cry when I finished this book is because I was on the subway and I had makeup on. And I wasn't confident that I had tissues.
You fought it.
I sure did. The fact that this is something that makes Paola cry, I've known her for years. Shocker. Me, I just see like a lonely bottle laying on the street and I'll immediately start crying. But this story, I don't know, dude. Like, I think we said at the beginning, like, you get so many universal human feelings and universal human experiences wrapped up in like very, very specific and unique characters experiencing very specific and unique things. It's so, I keep saying the word poignant.
It's almost tangible because we've had all of these feelings. We've all been both Emma and Dexter in different times of our lives. You can't dislike one and love the other. Like you at different times in the story, you love them and hate them. And I think that's maybe how we deal with ourselves. There's where we go through our own lives where we really like ourselves in some stages and we really don't like ourselves in some stages. It's all part of the package. You gotta embrace all of it in the same way you had to embrace Dexter when he's better and when he's terrible.
I think a huge chunk of this story is things that other people can bring out of us.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who can bring out like our best versions of ourselves. Like when Dexter literally says, I'm better when you're around. And there are people who bring out our like not so good versions of ourselves.
Like Ian brought out not so good versions of Emma.
Exactly. Like Emma brought out not so good versions of Ian. There's something really sad about knowing that they don't get to like live out until their old age together because it took them so long to get their shit together and figure it out. But there's also this very like bittersweet joy that comes with knowing that they spent at least some time together. It's not like an atonement situation where everyone's just dead.
But I think you know, as the reader and the viewer, Dexter needed to go through the shit he needed to go through.
Yeah.
For him to deserve to be with Emma and for him to appreciate Emma as herself, as a woman, as a lover. Because for a very long time, it was always guaranteed that she was going to be there no matter what he did. And he needed to lose that and fuck some shit up to realize her value. When they got together, it was so good. It was so good. He wasn't taking her for granted. He wasn't ever going to fuck that shit up.
And I think one of the things that David Nichols like really does accomplish with Dexter's characterization is that he can do and say and think things that are so abhorrent and you still don't perceive him as a bad person. There's no moment where I'm like, oh, Dexter's a malicious, evil person with bad intentions. I'm like, no, Dexter's a fucking doofus. He's being an idiot. I'm never like, oh, he's doing a bad thing for nefarious reasons.
Right. He's not evil. He's not malicious.
No.
He's self-destructing.
I feel like it takes really, really good characterization to serve you up a character who is more often than not doing things that make them unlikable to the reader, but the reader is still rooting for them to succeed. I want Dexter to get his shit together for the entire fucking book.
But you want him to get his shit together. Not even, I mean, sure, because, right, you want to see people, we're good people, you want to see people succeed. Good people want to see people succeed, period. But you want him to get his shit together for Emma. You want her to be happy, and you know that Dexter gives her that one way or the other. In order for that to succeed, he needs to get his shit together. And you're rooting for him, for her, because you want her to be happy because she deserves it. And also doing that, but still not making excuses for him, right? Because like Emma in that one scene says, like, I love you, but I don't like you. What is the point of you if you can't be there for me? This person that you love who is self-destructing and being selfish, you can let them go and choose yourself. And when it's time, if it's ever going to be time, when they're ready, then they might deserve you again. But you don't need to make yourself available to this person who's not respecting you. So like you're in a way sympathizing with Dexter throughout, not rooting for him, but in the same way, you're not making excuses for him. You're accepting him for who he is, and you just want to see him get better, but not at the expense of Emma. Exactly. So sister,
Let's go.
I want to ask you,
Let's go.
book or movie?
Pretty soon this is going to be book, movie, or miniseries. For right now, I'm going to say the book, only because you get so much more insight into their thought processes than you do in the movie. And I know that's timing, and I know that's a visual medium versus a written one, but I love that about the book. I love the juicy bonus content.
It's a tie for me for very specific reasons. The dialogue in the book is so good. Oh my God,
it's so smart.
It's witty. It's like deep without trying to be deep. It's just witty. Their banter, the writing, and the dialogue in the book. Actually, when I read the book years after I saw the movie, I was so mad that I had not read the book sooner.
Same.
Like, why haven't I been carrying this through my whole life? Like, thankfully, a lot of those great lines are said in the movie. So the movie stands out for me because of the score. The score always does it for me. Rachel Portman did a phenomenal job with this score. For me, it invokes what, I mean, obviously that's what a score is meant to do. It's meant to invoke the feeling you're supposed to be feeling. But it just does that. For me, it hits every time. All right. Will your significant other watch this with you?
Yeah, I think so.
Ariel watched with me the first time we watched it.
Ever?
The first time we watched this movie for the first time together.
Oh.
And he's never watched it with me again.
Because he's like, I don't need to see you weep.
Well, no, it's too sad.
Is that what he says? Really?
He's like, oh, I don't like, that's depressing. Like, I don't, because he will go into, he starts to imagine what if that situation would happen in our marriage. I mean, and I think anybody who would watch this movie would think about their significant other and be like, oh my God, how would I be? What would I do? So that's tough. You know, you don't ever want to put yourself in that headspace. So he just avoids it. Well, generational trauma. So I'll say this. There's not much generational trauma in the movie. However, this triggers a bunch of generational trauma for us. Unluckily for us, our family had its share of alcoholics. And so we saw that play out in different family members. And I feel like you see that in a lot of Black and brown families and immigrant families and families in
and
inner
families
cities
and just families of people that live together and families.
So for us, watching it, it's whatever, but like reading it and getting into the thought process of like literally seeing the descent of the alcoholic was weird and interesting, and oddly felt relatable in a way, because I feel like we've all been in a state of under the influence, right? But for some people, it's just not a thing you want to keep repeating. And it seems that for some people, they just don't know how to not continue to repeat that. So I don't know. It was weird to kind of get into that mindset.
This is something that I discuss a lot with my therapist. Something that I often, it's like take a shot anytime I mention my therapist. Danielle, you're the MVP. But I have a very hard time, and this is ironic, as someone who grew up with a decent amount of exposure to addiction and addictive behavior, I have a very hard time understanding the motivation. I don't think it's a motivation, right? It's a compulsion. It's a disease. But I have a very hard time understanding addiction, like as a concept, because I think I've consciously spent like a lot of my life actively avoiding addiction and actively avoiding what I sometimes mistakenly see as like a trap of like addictive behavior. And I always value being able to understand any insight into like the mind of someone with a substance issue, because I think it helps me give a little more grace to the people in my family that suffered with that. It brings me more understanding. It doesn't fix it, but if I'm able to just understand what's happening a little bit better, I feel like somehow I can like soothe my own bitterness about it. And I think the portrayal of Dexter, even though he really like genuinely, truly, my only qualm with this book is that Dexter just goes from being a full-blown alcoholic to just being like a regular person. And there's no mention of any work he had to do that. I'm not saying it's impossible. There are obviously people who manage that kind of thing, but like that level of like where he was at, you know, where the book led us to believe that he was at, that's not a thing you can recover from alone. And or with like sheer power of will. So that was my main, if I had a criticism of the book, it would be that. Yeah.
I felt like, where was this magic where he just was fine
before?
People who struggle with addiction struggle for different reasons, right? There are different triggers. Maybe for Dexter, it was maybe having purpose or having an anchor, kind of like, I know we mentioned that earlier, or just knowing that there was somebody that genuinely cared and loved him, I guess. Maybe that was something that was his trigger. And so once Emma was fully in his life, he had that guaranteed and no longer felt this need to perform for other people. Like maybe that was part of his healing, right? But I don't like that because it puts it all on one person, and that responsibility should never be on one person.
And I don't think this was the intention of the author. It just makes it seem like love is enough.
No, it's not.
Like, I was going to say, literally, we know from a little too much experience that it is unfortunately not enough.
So, yeah. So, as far as trauma.
There it is.
there it is.
As far as trauma, it was traumatic for us. No, I'm kidding.
But not to the point where I couldn't enjoy the
for
story.
sure.
It was a beautiful story. Part of our questions after we talk about these romantic movies that we love so much is, do they stay together? And right now that feels really sad to ask.
They would have. They absolutely would have. No question.
Right to the next one then. On a scale of 1 to ardently admire and love, how do you feel about this movie?
The book for me is like a 9 out of 10. The movie is like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. And I've already described the reasons why. It's just because I love how much more inner dialogue you get in the book. And that's just how books work, which I'm aware of.
I think I would say the movie, I would say a 7 to an 8. 7 or to an 8 out of 10. I love Anne Hathaway's portrayal. Jim Sturgis did a great job in his role. I just feel like I lose pieces of them through the jumps. Obviously, and I think that's just the nature of the type of story you're telling and the fashion that you're telling.
How it's structured.
But you definitely get a bit more of that in the book. Like there's some parts where you feel like a bit unsure if you're just watching the movie without having read the book. And even me as a rewatcher, there were parts I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened there. But you kind of just brush it off because you're enjoying the love story. But even so, I do think it was a good adaptation of the book in a short time because the movie feels short. I'll say an 8 out of 10. No. 7.5 out of 10. So that's that, dear listener.
It sure is.
So that was One Day the movie. The book is going to be adapted into a miniseries. Actually, not is going to be adapted. Has been adapted into a miniseries. And it releases on February 8th.
It sure does.
So if you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, tune into Netflix on February 8th because we'll be able to see this story broken down into a 14-part series, which I am very excited about. I can't wait. I'm probably going to try to get through it that weekend because I know I'm going to just keep rewatching. I really hope it's good.
I think it will be.
Yes, this book deserves it. So another great addition to the One Day canon. Let's see how it goes. I'm excited. Guys, give us your thoughts. Let us know what you think. If you've read the book, if you've seen the movie, did it affect you like it affected us?
Yeah, we're clearly fucking struggling out here.
Will you be seeing the show? If you do, reach out.
Will you be DMing David Nichols?
You already know where to find us on Instagram at Sisflix Podcast. Shoot us an email at sisflixpodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think. If you have suggestions or a movie request for us to cover in the future. And if you like what you heard and want to hear more, please leave a review anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
And whatever happens tomorrow,
we've had today.
I'll
start crying.